I'm going to be audacious enough and try and do it via a PowerPoint presentation, something that doesn't come naturally to most journalists, as Tamalda will agree with me. But again, this is just to allow my thoughts to be sort of controlled and not to let them sort of flow all over. The topic that I've picked to speak on is India, rising role of the media, because in my own view, I think everyone in the room may or may not have a view in the economy, but everyone will definitely have a view on the media and the role it's playing. Such is the nature of media in this country. So I'm going to start off by playing a small clip that talks about the rising India premise on which I'm going to be talking.
AOL, Yahoo, Amazon. Twitch has really created a very strong brand.
The dot-com bubble burst, falling drastically on the NASDAQ.
The Indian economy faces little trouble given that the Indian IT companies were not wholly dependent on the US market.
Terrorist attack.
Enron Online will change the market.
India introduces state's fiscal reforms facility.
India is growing by more than 7% per year, considerably higher than the global average.
Government announces its strongest economic growth figures at 9.4%.
Stocks all around the world are tanking.
Free fall down nearly 10%.
Years of tremendous growth. India's economy is now facing a slowdown. But despite that, it's still growing at the second fastest rate in the world.
The Indian bank system is completely solid.
India will hold as much as 15% of the global wealth in the year 2050.
So I think my premise is rising India, and this tells you why. Agnostic to the nature of political formation, fundamentally, if you look at India over the last 15 years, it's a rising India story. You cannot dispute it. Lehman happened. You've had all kinds of crises over the last 15 years. You've had, the Asian crisis. You've had the 9/11 attacks, terror attacks in Mumbai, Rexit, you talk it. But fundamentally, the trajectory of growth has always been the way up. So I think you cannot dispute the fact that India is a rising economy. That's the first premise. The second, of course, is another way of looking at the same story. India per capita income from 2006 to 2016. One would argue that the pace of growth is not as rapid as it should be, and that's why you probably need stronger political leadership, and that's why you need sort of more able hands as far as economic policy making is concerned. But fundamentally, from 2006 to 2016, over a 10-year trajectory, the trajectory is one-sided. You've seen some of our peers, as far as the BRIC nations is concerned, this slide is not going to look as good as for some of those countries, both the GDP growth figures and the per capita income. So I think that's the first premise that I'm making. I'm sure everyone in this room will agree that on the rising India story, I think that is sort of in many ways indisputable. What about the role of the media? And I know everyone here has a sort of point of view on media, and this is why I think, and I'm going to restrict myself to television news, because everyone has a point of view on television news. Why television news matters? This is data from BARC, which is the agency that measures television news viewership, and this is just over 2 years since its inception. There's been an 84% growth in viewership of English general news channels and 82% growth in viewership of English business news channel in just a period of 2 years. So while you might argue about the nature of content, my own view of the way I would look at this slide and say is, it's not as if people are loving the content that's being put out. It's that there is a lot of appetite for English news, period. People started watching a lot of English movies over the last 4 or 5 years. It's it plays into the aspirational Indian theme that people want to know more about English language. So there's appetite for a lot of English news content, whether it's general news, whether it's business news. So I think, now formats, power of the media is all something that we could argue about. But this is, again, an indisputable fact that over the last 2 years, more people are watching English news than ever before. I think that's, and this is across channels. We've got all the channels in the category. And I don't want to make it a which is number one, which is number two game, but this is fundamentally the way English television news is stacked up in the country right now. Evolution of Indian news TV media, right? If you were to trace it back to the DD days, you had a monopoly of state-sponsored media, and then you had the advent of private news television, which was sort of cautious in its approach towards reportage, and then you had in-depth fact-based reportage through late 90s. And then, of course, you had media playing the role of opposition, which happened through much of the last 10 years, right? Media was questioning the government on all that it did. And then, of course, that sort of, in a way, set the stage for what I would call activist media, right? Especially television news. If you were to compare TV news with print as a medium, you would say that television news is far more activist. Now, there are pitfalls of this as well, and I'm going to be one of the few editors who will openly admit what is the downside of this. The biggest downside being, as of today, everything has been stuck in a binary, right? The pressure that being activist puts on media is you're either right or you're wrong. There's absolutely no space for nuance in English television media. I think because you're forced, in a lot of ways, a lot of channels are forced to take very, very polarizing positions on a lot of issues. So you're either extreme right of center, extreme left of center. So the scope for nuance is dead. The scope for, at least in English general news media, as far as television is concerned. But you cannot doubt the premise that there is an activist media. Much of the anti-corruption movement, I would say, is because of the power of news media, and specifically television news media, the kind of noise level they created, because at the end of the day, targeting a very, very, very small niche of people who watch TV news. Even though there's been a rapid growth, fundamentally, the number of people who watch English news is a lot lower than the number of people who watch Hindi news. And yet, the impact of English news media is, 10 times that of Hindi news media, even though the viewership of Hindi news would be. So, the agenda that English television news media sets is what is followed today. So, the advent of activist media, in my view, is good. The flip side to this is, one, that conversations are all stuck in binaries, that there is very little scope for nuance, and that's not necessarily good in my own point of view. The other flip side is the priorities. What is it that media is chasing? Now that it's become so powerful, what is it that television news media is chasing? This is interesting data that tells you the content split on English news channels over the last 6 months, from 4th February to 4th August 2017. Again, this is data sourced from BARC. 39% crime, law and order. Pakistan, in my view, would be 25 of this 39%, right? Politics, government news, 31%. Social and others, 16%, right? So effectively, when you talk of changing India, development issues, growth, economy, the split is just heavily stacked against them. So you have the power, you have the reach, you have the influence, and yet your priority set is so heavily stacked in favor of a certain genre of content. Now, you could argue that it's because the vast majority of people want crime-related content or issues on law and order, or people love to see debates on Pakistan, and that's why that's being fed to them. But this is the reality of today, that on the one hand, you have an activist media, but on the other hand, the activist media is using large part of its skills and its power and influence in what I would call focusing on areas that are not adding to, quote-unquote, nation building. Right? This is just, before I play this slide, I think what is it that the media can play? So there are two things that I want to talk about. One is something that our network did on demonetization. Now, we at ET now were very cautious on demonetization. I would probably say we were critical to start with, and we remain cautious. I think the jury is still out on what it did to the economy as a whole. But a month after demonetization, when we felt that the impact of it was far more significant than people originally anticipated in the way that the slowdown that was causing to the economy, as a network, we thought, why can't we sort of help change the narrative from demonetize India to remonetize India? And so we launched a campaign. This is just a small clip on what that was and the impact that had.
नवंबर 2016 की रात्रि को 12 बजे से 500 रुपए और 1000 रुपए के करेंसी नोट लीगल टेंडर नहीं रहेंगे.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the most revolutionary economic reform in the nation's history: demonetization. The objective was to curb the flow of black money in the economy. The intention was good, but it had a huge impact on the common man. The new notes weren't printed yet, so people didn't have cash to spend. And since there wasn't enough money circulating in the system, industries faced shutdowns. The stock market plunged, and there were long queues outside ATMs. Every media and publishing house in the country slammed the government's decision. But we decided to flip the script by launching Remonetize India. We urged people to limit their cash transactions and start paying digitally. We got members of the parliament and economists to kickstart a digital revolution. Famous movie stars were roped in to reach out to the masses.
The Remonetize India movement
is our call to arms. We pledge
to rise and protect
the world's fastest growing economy.
We pledge to remonetize India.
At the same time, we enable thousands to start transacting digitally by setting up Remonetize India assistance camps. Go Cashless rallies were organized to help people become digitally literate. we launched a website where people could sign up and pledge to remonetize India. The campaign inspired many to come forward and help others during these challenging times. Soon, Remonetize India got a huge boost on social media. Thousands of unique identification cards were made. Millions of people enrolled for their PAN cards. And a record number of bank accounts were opened. This way, the Times network helped India transform from a cash-dependent economy to a cashless one, thereby paving way for a new India.
ये फैसला कठोर था, लेकिन भविष्य उज्जवल है.
Right now, you know, this wasn't a sort of, the government didn't pay us to do this, important caveat, and nor did anyone else. We did it on our own because we just felt we had to do it. And even as we were doing it, we had eaten our critical questioning, calling out. It's just that, I think, again, the problem is today you're either a cheerleader of the government or you're not, which is again a very painful binary economy. I think you can contribute to nation building without being a cheerleader of the government, and that's the fine line that I believe Indian media, quote unquote, Indian television media needs to draw. The other point that I want to make is specific to business media, business television media, business news media, is again priority focus. I think what we focus on a lot is on issues that in my point of view as an editor of ET now, today I wonder, do they really matter? Let me talk about one transaction, a Sri Renuka Wilmar deal, right? Some 2,000 crore infusion. Every paper had it on their front page, all channels screamed with it. How many people does it impact, except for the investors of probably Sri Renuka? I think our focus is so much on issues that are so niche, that are so narrow, that eventually our core, large majority of our reportage, our news gathering skills are focused on issues that frankly don't contribute to nation building. What is that we could do? Just 2 slides. One, this is the share of financial products in household savings in this country. India over 2012, 2014, 2016, actually it's flat, which basically means that household savings are being channelized only at about 20%. It's come down from 2012 to 2016. Look at China, Brazil, Russia, South Africa, US, of course, a developed country, which fundamentally means that Indian business media, you've had, channels for 18 years or however long you've had newspapers for all these years, but fundamentally we've not been able to impress upon people the importance of moving your assets towards financial assets, move away from physical savings to financial savings, right? And another slide, which is household investment in equities, right? Household investment in equities, again, look at India, 4%. And, we've got Goldman Sachs, which predicts this to go up to 8% by 2022. So even by 2022, only 8% of investment in financial assets, I'm not talking about investment in household savings, but investments in financial assets will go towards equities, right? I think everyone in this audience would understand, at least this is an evolved audience, would understand that, putting 1,000 rupees on a mutual fund on a long-term basis is far more rewarding than putting that 1,000 rupees on gold or on real estate. So I think fundamentally we need to question ourselves. The role of the media should be to ask yourselves to every day when you look at your news list, what is it that you're doing towards nation building? How do you pick issues like this? This could be one of the many planks that Indian media, television, business media needs to stand for and move away from, the way we have been tutored to, the way we've been focused to thinking in terms of what is news and what is not news. I think that's just this limited point that I wanted to make. I think there's a lot of role for the media to play. The fact that we have this influence is phenomenal. We just need to get a priority set right, and we need to pick the right sort of targets and hopefully go after them. Thank you so much.